the oneness of the truth. You see? And he says that the truth does not have plurality, and the truth does not change, unchangeable. If something is unchangeable, that is real. And that aspect of permanence was also taken up by Socrates and Plato. And also in Islam, you'll find this thing. If you look at modernity or modernization, basically modernity is based on a commonality, on universality of values. Of course, it talks about integration, but integration at what, on what basis? On the basis of homogeneity. Example, modern state is a nation state is a modern state. Most of the state system in the world is modern, is secular, is territorial, is political, is legal, is not ethical, is not moral. What used to be in the age of Plato or Aristotle. So the state, the existence of a state today itself is the product of modernity, in which you have a nation state. In the nation state, you have a common code of conduct, a common identity, a state identity, a national identity decided by the state, giving no place to religion, but religion as a subordinate aspect, you see. So that homogeneity is basically politically carved out. So a state is still a political product. It's not a moral product. It's not a moral institution, according to modern theories. So nation state, talking about integration, but again based on the homogeneity principle. In the homogeneity, the diversities and pluralities do not stand. If they stand as a challenge, the state will abolish it. For example, France is the good example of the nation state, where the French concept of nationalism does not accept the cultural varieties or diversities or variations of people having different faith. So that political homogeneity in France is creating problem for those people who are not French in religion or in ethnicity. So this is, very important. And also you find in modernity, it also talks about, it's also based on the principle of change. And change is always good. Progress, change, development. Development is considered as assured progress. Whatever is happening for good. There is a concept. There is an understanding of modernity. And that's why you'll find that the liberalist or liberalism always talk about liberal millenarianism. That today is good and tomorrow is better and day after tomorrow is the best. A very linear concept of development. So they never take development as negative. They always take development as assured progress, always positive. But in Islam, this is not the concept. For example, if you take from Aligarh to Delhi, wide roads have been widened. And in this process, in the last 5 or 10 years, hundreds and thousands of old trees, big trees were cut down. They were scrapped. A lot of bushes were scrapped. And the green areas were scrapped. And the roads were widened. Of course, it provided a very good path for the, heavy vehicles, very good vehicles, or speeding vehicles. But on the other hand, this kind of development also created environmental hazard. There's a lot of trees right from Aligarh to Delhi, or say up to Bulandshahr. Is 100 kilometers full of trees on both sides of the road. Are no more. Now you have new trees. So of course, development is not without price. But in liberalism, development is considered as something as assured progress. This is epistemological a fault. This is epistemological, what do you say, fault line. Uh, and then you find that they say in liberalism, they say that why change is good, why development is good, because we have more science, we have more education. If we have more science and we have more education, then this society will be more, enlightened. So the enlightenment, the Renaissance, which created modernity, modernism, modernization, is basically depending upon this. Whereas, in case of Islam, and the other another important thing in modernity also, that modernity is also based on experimentation, on experiences, on empiricism, on quantification, on observation, more scientific. And modernity is also based on or it also, it also talks about the theory of causality, cause and effect. Effect because of cause. So what you say that it's a very tangible, the modernity is also talking about tangible factor, which you can touch, not intangible. That's why you find that modernity does not accept religion or revelation or faith as something true, real, because they say that cannot be proved scientifically. And that's why you'll find that some of the European philosophers, they say God is dead. But I tell you that both are two different things. Modernity is basically defining the social existence. And modernity is basically talking about the post-historical society. And modernity is also associated with endless progress. It is rooted in Renaissance. Modernity is linked with sophist philosophy in Greek period. It is also related with what you say, the skepticism of Greece. It is more related to Heraclitus with the Romans, the pagan Romans. And modernity is also identified with the theory of power of Machiavelli, Niccolo Machiavelli, the 16th century Italian philosopher and historian who gave the theory of power. And this modernity is also associated with the ideas of the philosophers, like, for example, Hobbes, and also Bentham, that is utilitarianism. And then you find a line, a chain of liberal thinkers came up. So the domain of modernity is very much scientific, observational, empirical, experimental, experience-based, which you can see directly. So basically, it is more related to human tendencies, the human behavior. And that's why modernity lies in innovation, in new thinking, new action. For example, Renaissance, or for example, Protestantism. Protestant religion is also a modern religion because it came against Catholicism, the Catholic religion. Protestants are also against Greek Orthodox. Protestants are not compatible with also Gregorian Armenian Church. And Protestants are also not compatible with the Russian Orthodox. All are Christianity. So this modernity involves human beings a lot. Human beings' independent thought and action in the construction of a society and institutions. Whereas in Islam, things are quite different. Islam provides a different system, a different economy, a different state system, a different values. Why it says, because it's also very important to mention here, because modernity, of course, modernity is claimed by every country in every parts of the world. But actually, the modernity and the modern thinkers and the modern thought and modern philosophy, where is the place where it came? The place is basically Euro-Atlantic, within Europe also, Western Europe. And then you have America. Then you have Canada. Or you have central states like Australia and New Zealand. It's basically countries.
लगता है जिस नेटवर्क की मैं तारीफ कर रहा था शायद वो अर्शी खान साहब आवाज आ रही है क्या मेरी? देखिए बाहर हो गए, वो चले गए. तो अर्शी खान साहब दोबारा ज्वाइन करेंगे, नेटवर्क की कुछ प्रॉब्लम की वजह से वो जडम साहब अनम्यूट कर लीजिए.
मैंने कहा जरा देख लीजिए क्या क्या सिचुएशन है.
जी 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 मैं देख रहा हूँ. आ गए अर्शी खान साहब, आ गए दोबारा. अर्शी खान साहब को डिस्कनेक्ट हो गया था ना. जी 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 अस्सलाम वालेकुम.
आ गया मैं.
जी जी जी, बहुत अच्छा।
सलाम।
बहुत अच्छा।
सॉरी फॉर पता नहीं कितने देर से कट
हाँ,
गया।
वो डिस्कनेक्ट, वो थोड़ा सा, वो जो मैं तारीफ कर रहा था ना अलीगढ़ के नेटवर्क की, वो मिलाकर, क्योंकि आपका कई मरतबा बीच में रेड आया, अभी फिर रेड आ गया है, तो रेड येलो हो रहा। खैर, आप अपनी गुफ्तगू जारी रखिए, अब अगर डिस्कनेक्ट हो ही जाएंगे तो जाहिर है क्या कर सकते हैं, लेकिन आप अपनी स्पीच जारी रखिए।
जस्ट अ मिनट।
जी।
You are visible and audible.
अच्छा अच्छा
This is technology, my dear sir.
जी। So, am I audible now?
या।
Yes.
So I was talking about the birth of modernity, the amma and abba of modernity, the mother and father of modernity. It took place. So modernity has a geography. My point is this: modernity has a culture. Modernity has its own cultural root. Modernity is embedded with a particular experiences, not universal. This is a very important point to be kept in mind. So this modernity cannot be dissociated from the Western Europe. Now, the experiences of the Western Europe, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So, the experiences of the Western Europe, it created their own institutions, their own thought, their own action, their own technology, their own field of operations, their own way of life, their own pattern of culture, their own pattern of education, and their own pattern of legitimacy. And that's why you find that democracy is also, because democracy is claimed by many different cultures. Islam also talks about democracy. They talks about shura, but the modernity does not accept Islam as a democratic force. Whether you have a election in any Islamic country, but generally the modernists do not accept. Similarly, modernists also do not accept the democratic election or federal feature of a country which is communist or socialist. So this modernity is a product of a particular territory. So it has regional specificity. It has a historical specificity. Hello.
हाँ
Uh,
ठीक है.
I mean, okay. So
You are
it is. Thank you. It is connected with a region. Associated, embedded with a region, with a culture, with a group of languages. For example, if you look into the modernity, where it is written, it is in French language, in English language, the Spanish language, the Portuguese language, it's a German language. You will not find in other languages. It has its own metaphor, for example, like political Islam is a word which is not positive. Political Islam is basically a word which is a kind of abusive word used by the liberal theorist. But we do not accept, we do not know about this. Islamism, for example, the political Islam, or liberal Islam, for example. So these are the categories, you see. They use it because the modernist thinkers, they look from their own spectacle. They have their own panorama. They have their own cultural context. They have their own paradigm. And why it is? Because they have their own epistemological context. They cannot see from your eyes. So that's why the modernity is very regional, is particularistic. It is more Eurocentric. But generally, we accept modernization and modernity as globalist, as universal. It is not universal. It's a different thing that modernity has been accepted by different people who have no experiences in modernity, who have no experiences on experimentations, which created their institutions, and they are compatible with this. Why? Because of different kinds of revolutions in Europe and in North America. It's a political revolution, economic revolution, and some of the revolutions also went against the past their own past, their own history, their own tradition and culture. And that's why modernity talks about post-historical society. They are European, but they do not associate themselves with their own religion in an orthodox way. So that's why you will find that in Europe or in the Western world, even the churches are secularized. Church is there, but it's secular church, secularized, because the state is secular, society is secular. And what is secular? Secular means not only separation of religion from politics. I'm audible or not?
Yes.
Okay. So secularism does not mean, thank you, sir. Secularism does not mean dissociation or alienation of religion from politics. No. Secularism also means, especially in the European context, in the real modernity contextual paradigm, that a religion is subordinate to politics, subordinate to a state. A religion or religious apparatus is fully dependent upon the state, upon the ruling institutions. So therefore, religion loses its legitimacy, its autonomy, its rationality, and it becomes they get limited to their own paradigm, to their own sphere. They cannot get legitimacy from the state because the state is something very alien, very foreign to the religion, and the state considers religion as a problem. So therefore, you find that modernity, the birth of modernity in Europe, took place, especially in the context of a contest against a state, because who prevailed in Europe before the modern state? Religion, Pope, Church. And that's why you find a great anger, a great protest, a great rejection, dissociation, negation of the political forces against religion and religious institutions and their values, which brings a new setup, a new thought, a new institution in Europe. But this concept of this, so this is not universal, but generally, as a lack of our knowledge, it's universal. It cannot be universal. It's very particularistic. And therefore, democracy, you find that this kind of modernity also created nation state. Modernity created nationalism in Europe. And nationalism in Europe created colonialism all over the world. And the same modern state became imperial power, like German imperial power, like American imperial power, like British imperial power, like French imperial power. So they are the products. So imperialism and colonialism, they are a product of modernity. Whereas you cannot find this kind of exploitative tendency of modernity in the pre-modern or non-modern, non-liberal institutions. For example, Ottomans, Dowlat-e Osmania, that the Ottoman state. The Ottomans, they were controlling part of the whole, almost all West Asia, North Africa, and also Eastern Europe. Or for example, Mughals, or the Muslims. They were in India as a ruling class for more than 700 years. But you will not find all the treasures of India in Uzbekistan, in Fergana Valley. The Babar king from Fergana Valley. He came from Afghanistan, the present Uzbekistan. You will not find the Indian treasures in Afghanistan, in Uzbekistan. You will not find the treasures of the Balkans in Ottomans. They did not exploit. Of course, they controlled the territory. At the same time, they also gave the millet system, the autonomy, the economic and cultural and social autonomy to different nationalities, millets. But you'll find, the modern forces, they exploited India for 200 years economically, and you'll find most of the things of India in the British Museum. This is the nature of exploitation of the domination of modern modern mindset and non-modern mindset. I'm not saying this one is good and bad. I'm just talking about the nature, understanding the nature of modernity embedded with, dominance on power and legitimacy, etc. So this modernity is is the product of the Western world, in the Western world, especially in Western Europe, Eurocentric. And because of this, you will find that modernity has developed its own institution, criteria, and legitimacy criteria. They cannot approve your action from your criteria, but they have their own criteria. And that's why you find that Islam, which is completely different, because Islam is not based on experience. Many, maybe Muslim countries might have adopted and borrowed the modernity, modern state, modern system, but they are not compatible with this. I'm not saying they are antithesis, but both have two different things. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, yes, yes.
So for example, buffalo and cow both have two different, both produce milk, but both are different. And the nature of the milk is also different, the effect of the milk. And also goat also gives milk. All are milk, but different. So that's why you will find that in that the modernity is purely based on human experimentations, changing and demolishing the pre-existing linear process. Whereas in Islam, there are two things. One is where you cannot make change. But in something you can make change, for example. What should be the criteria of road and house, etc. What time the shop should be closed. The peripheral things of society can be changed. But something which is related to faith, because Islam is basically faith. And faith is based on revelation. Religion is talking about believing in the Almighty Allah, which you cannot see, believing in the Risalat, that Huzur Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Hazrat Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is our prophet. I have not seen, but I believe in this. See? So believing without seeing. It's a completely different paradigm. Islam is basically a faith based on revelation, based on Tawheed, Risalat, Akhrat, Qiyamah, Qismat. It cannot be accepted as a legitimacy criteria in modernity, even by postmodernism. No, it cannot be. Because one is talking about the legitimacy by the creatures, legitimacy by the human beings. Modernity is talking about, whereas Islam is talking about legitimacy by the Creator. You see, so this is something very different. I think now it is 10:40, so I had a lot of things to say, but I cannot mention it here because the time is very short and I cannot go. The only 10 minutes are left, so it's better to have.
But you give the salient points.
The salient point is basically I was talking about the modern worldview of the liberal paradigm, the modern worldview of the socialist, communist paradigm, the Promethean worldview, and then then I say that how the modernity has developed its own metaphor for the Turkophobia, Arbophobia, Iranophobia, Saddamophobia, Osama phobia, you see, and then lastly Islamophobia, you see, etc., and then extremism, etc., etc. So, and the things in Islam, that how these things in Islam, they're unchangeable, like Rahmat Khudabandi and Amal Saleh, Darul Amal, Darul Akhirat, for example, Miraj, you see, the Quran and the revelations, etc. Resurrection and the Day of Judgment, Qiyamah, for example. Whereas these things do not have any space in modernity, etc. And the modernity is completely, is more Promethean, Promethean and Heraclitan and utilitarian and Benthamite approach, you see. And then talking about this modernity which created a power-driven state, power-driven society, money-driven society, etc., in which the freedom of individual within society is unlimited and freedom of individual within a state is limited, you see. So these are the things which I just wanted to say. And there's something in Islam, for example, allegiance to faith. Islam does not talk about nationalism, but Islam talks about patriotism. Islam does not talk about feminism, but Islam talks about the rights of women in parda, you see. And then you have something very different from the open society, or you can say the free society, secularism, you know, money-driven democracies, sovereignty, concept of sovereignty, in which you have the God is sovereign, whereas human beings are sovereign, and the concept of power and politics, etc. So, so these are the things on which you can talk about, you can see the difference between modernity and Islam. So, thank you very much. I think this is I think I should give some time for the comments or some.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया प्रोफेसर अर्शद खान साहब। ये आप क्या क्वेश्चन ले सकते हैं Q&A बॉक्स से? 5 सवाल
अगर पूछें तो क्या हर्ज क्या?
क्लिक करके ले लीजिए, क्लिक करके लोगों ने राइट किया हुआ है Q&A बॉक्स में।
अच्छा, इससे अच्छा ये है,
ये Q&A क्वेश्चन है इसमें।
What are the threats posed by the modern Western concept of modernity on Muslims in different parts of the world? I think I have given this answer. This question was raised by me in Teaz Afrin. In my old lecture, you know, the answer is already given. And then there's another question. The question of Islam will never change because of eternal lines of the Quran. Of course, it is right. Of course, you are right. I agree with you. It's a good comment. And then another is, please throw some light on the postmodern ideology. I think this is a question by Mr. Fahad. Let me tell you that generally students are confused about multiculturalism and postmodernity as something very different from liberal and modern. No, of course it is not. Postmodernity, of course, it accepts diversity, but accepting diversity, because Canada also accepts diversity. Canada accepts diversity. America also accepts diversity, of course, but America does not accept its, you know, in principle as multiculturalism, but it accepts diversity. Even you can see that that Switzerland also accepts diversity. Germany accepts diversity. But the criteria of acceptance is liberal, is modern. So postmodernity, the root of the postmodernity is ultimately rooted in modernity. For example, you can have your festival in Canada as a Sikh, as a Muslim, as a Hindu, but you cannot deal with your women through your own law. The moment you apply, that will be considered as domestic violence, because there your individual autonomy ends. And the individual rights mentioned, accepted by the Canadian Constitution, liberal modern, will be applicable to your autonomy. So therefore, the postmodernity, it talks about, you know, accepting diversity, but it is not free from the basic, you know, the basic rim and the, you know, the lever of modernity. So this is the thing which I think I should say. And then you have another is, what is his name? What is his name? Is modernization similar to westernization? If yes, then how much? Because some people say that it's possible to be modern without accepting the answer. Yeah, of course. You see, it is a metaphor. Westernization is a metaphor. Metaphor used by modernity. For example, I give you example of burger. You know, most of you might be interested in burger. Hot dog, for example, burger. Most children, they like burger, Coca-Cola, etc. These are the modern dishes. And this burger is basically is Western. You may put, you know, aloo tikki from India, but it's not more. It's not. It has its, you know, it cannot, you cannot change its structural, spiritual aspect. It's structural and what you say, the substantive aspect. So modern is basically Western. For example, your dress. You know the quote, tie pant. You may not have tie, but the dress itself is modern. Modern is based from where it came. The dress in India is kurta pajama, dhoti, lungi, sherwani, achkan. So westernization, and because westernization is basically, if you say westernization, people will not accept it because it's a westernization. But if you say modernization, people will accept it. So it's a kind of metaphor. It's a kind of disclaimer. You see. So this thing, and then because time is very short, so I come to another aspect. Who is the? Where is the question? Anonymous attendee. I don't know who is that anonymous attendee. Who is this guy? You should always put your name. Not anonymous. What are you doing? This anonymous is always done on the Facebook, where some people make use illegal chats. Anyhow, people try to justify integrate Islam with modern ideologies to prove that Islam is compatible with all of them. What should be our stand? Islam is not exactly orthodox or modern. What should be our stand? I'm not talking about the stand. That what should be our, basically, I just wanted to show how to understand modernity. This is my lecture, or my purpose here is not to what we should do. I'm talking about what is it. I'm not talking about what should be. That's different, because it will open another gate of etc. Then you have Manan Khan. How far Muslims have been successful to provide an alternative to of episode? Yes, you are right. Very nice. Muslims have generally failed to provide the an alternative epistemological paradigm. This is a big problem, because we had epistemological paradigm. We had the epistemological paradigm that existed in India before the arrival of the British. We had. At that time, you find that the education system, which was dominated by madrasa system and Gurukul, and most of the bureaucracies and the judiciary was also coming from madrasa. And that time, madrasa was as rich as you know, you have a great universities like Oxford University and other universities in USA and in France, and in that time in India in 17th century we were having that type of madrasa, very big endowment, very rich madrasa. Therefore, the Raja Ram Mohan Rai was also product of madrasa. Madrasa was not only giving a religious education, of course, partly it was giving religious education, but it was also giving a lot of other educations. So whole bureaucracy was coming from there. So they broke this backbone of Indian education. So that's why you will find that the epistemological paradigm which was developing or developed by the theologians, by the scholars, the Muslim scholars and other non-Muslim scholars in India, that basically, that could not develop after the arrival of the British, because they introduced their own language, their own system of education, etc. So this is in brief, because it will take time. Now you have Galaxy M30. I don't know, you should have put your name. So, sir, this is the difference between Islamic concept of adl and the Western concept of course, in brief, I will tell the Islamic concept of adl basically starts with the self. It's justice begin with self, whereas in West, justice between two people. So this is, sir, because it's very tangible, you see. So tangible, you have more physical, because modernity is more physical, whereas Islam is more ethical and what you say supernatural and spiritual. You cannot see, but you believe in. So this is. Then you have Islam is the best modern in advance. It is best modern. It is advanced infinity time. What is the infinite time? It is advanced. I don't know. I think anyhow. I think that modern. We should not use the word modern with Islam, because modern means basically modern means newness. You are going to create something new. In Islam, you cannot change the concept of Tawheed, Risalat, Akhirat. You cannot, but you can change something else. So this is, so we have to be very careful when we use the word modern with Islam. Now you have, who is another? Let me see. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you. Then Usman Ahmad, he he asked, there is perception that the mankind developed in the last century is far more than the silent history of. Despite of this, why the poverty does become the modern major problem in this. I mean, I don't think it is your comment, Usman. This your comment, your own understanding. It's not a question. So if this question is very brief, I can take it. Was what was the response of ulama of Indian Saudi against the incursion? Yes, of course, it's very, very good, important, I think very nice question raised by Tahir Iqbal Roll. The ulama responded a lot, whether it was in 1916 in India, 1914, 1915, 1919, 1920, or even in 1870s and 60s, a lot, ever before. We don't have the record of that. Ulama also responded in 1857, for example. They gave their life, they gave their everything, a big sacrifice made to the country against the colonial occupations, etc. But of course, that has not been highlighted in my country, maybe because of the lack of the political patronage. So we have a very rich history in India of the ulama, and most of the things are lying in the papers, in the pages. I think the time will come in future, inshallah, when more researchers will find out where and how many and the nature of the contribution of ulama against the British imperialism. So, incursion of modernity, you can say yes, of course, because the British, for example, the corruption system which was introduced by, of course, we had corruption, but different type. But the real corruption was introduced by the British. I tell you that in 1760s, in 1770s, the only Bengal economy, the economy of Bengal, present East Bengal, sorry, West Bengal and Bangladesh, the economy of this, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, the present, the in 1760s and 70s, the economy of Bengal was better than all European economies. At that time, you'll find that the share of Britain in the world market, in the world production, in the world trade was 2%. That time, and India was having more than 25% share in the world trade. India was a big hub of manufacturing, of trade. When the British came, now the impact is even now. So who is responsible for that? Of course, the this thing. Now we have 6 minutes only, and Walaikum Assalam, anonymous attendee. I don't like this. Please change your name in future. It's not good. If you are a student, if you are a good human being, you should have your name. Is modernity a challenge to West, as it is for the East, particularly to Muslim societies? Response modernity has failed the West itself. See, the West is already facing the crisis in terms of family values. You don't find many youths in West. You don't find the marriage, accepted as a way of a very high value. For example, divorce is very common. Live-in partnership is very common. Even I know one author, and he has written a book on terrorism. And the name of the book is the Operation Blackheart. It was written by Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Sheffer, and he writes, "I don't know who is my father." You see, so that kind of culture has come. You see, uh, so of course this is a big challenge because in Islam also you'll find in Aristotle, also you'll find G. Baudin of 16th century French thinker. They all talk about the values of family. So the system, the value system, the family value system itself is declining, sharply declining in the places where modernity has become very strong. So this is the thing. And then can a religion that requires practice it that seems archaic to Western eyes, such as wearing of hijab, be considered as modern? Osama and Jum, I do not understand your question because time is short. So, of course, hijab is not considered as modern, but they are now creating, the I think some people, I don't know, because maybe because of the lack of their conceptual thing, they are talking about Islamic feminism. Islamic feminism is not possible. If either you have feminism or Islamic, you see. But anyhow, this is not the time to discuss this. Anyhow, I can come later on about this. Uh, if we argue modernization, if we argue modernization is not accommodating diversity, faith, and liberty of practice, then how can we defend societies and the influence of some particular faith, religious belief, if they are to accommodate approach, even if the scripts are in favor of tolerance, they cannot.
Hello, Professor
Ji,
Arshi.
ji,
I have a little submission.
ji.
You entertain only those questions which are related to your talk.
Okay, sir.
If
Okay, okay. Ghaffal, I think that because generally questions are asked verbally, so I generally do not take it like this. But anyhow, let me move ahead. Asra, Aslam, what is difference between renewal and reforms? Renewal and reform is very, is very, very clear. Renewal is something which is, going to expire, then you renew it. It's a very, this is a question for English language. And the reform is something which you are going to make further improvement, addition or, subtraction or something like this. So I think these are all the things. So
Uh, thank you very much, Professor Arshid Khan sahab.
yes,
And now the time of next lecture delivered by Professor Zadam Khan साहब. आपका उन्वान है इस्लाम एंड सेकुलरिज्म. तो मैं गुजारिश करूंगा प्रोफेसर जडम खान साहब से कि वो अपनी गुफ्तगू फरमाएं. और आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया
yes,
कि आपने बहुत उम्दा लेक्चर और सवाल जवाब से हम सबको रोशनास कराया. शुक्रिया बहुत.
thank you.
जी प्रोफेसर जडम खान साहब.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmadu nusalli ala rasulil kareem. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm really thankful to the chairman of the Institute of Objective Studies, who has included my name in those who will be speaking on different themes. And the theme allotted to me is Islam and secularism. Highly talked about terms and highly relevant to the modern times, not only internationally, but nationally as well. Islam is secularism, both have to be evaluated in terms of their concept, their historical evolution, their application, and consequences. So it's a very big area. And this big area really and factually cannot be undertaken within few minutes and within the allotted time. So I will be talking in a highly telegraphic manner. Secularism is a phenomenon which has taken place much later than the inception and development of Islam. In real sense of the term, what you will see that all these concepts in Western political philosophy, they all trace it to Greece and Plato, Aristotle, and so on. And same is the case with secularism. That goes to the area of sophists, and they say secularism was initiated by them. But to be very frank with the modern terminology and application of the term secularism, the European 30 years war is a very prominent landmark. And Treaty of Westphalia is famous in this area, where it was believed, after losing thousands and thousands of people's life, that we should separate religion from the state politics. The Treaty of Westphalia was signed. But you know, if you look at the history of Europe, you will find that Europe continued with its policies, including the policy of colonialism, for quite some time. And as a result of the whole lust of acquisition of colonies, you will find that there was a scramble of Africa. Asia was already dominated by European powers, and all the continents of the world were divided for exploitation. This continued for quite some time. And passing through all these historical landmarks, the idea of secularism acquired connotations. This was the historical sharp development of the concept of secularism. But if you look at the ideological aspect of secularism, you find two important philosophers who have contributed a lot to the idea of secularism. First is John Locke, and second is Jefferson, who have given definite ideas about secularism. But secularism is a concept and secularism is a process also. You cannot have secularism without undergoing the process of secularization. So in my view, adoption of process of secularization is far more important than the concept of secularism. Secularization has got many, many steps, and these have to be taken into account. What do the secularists claim? They claim that through secularism, we can acquire certain objectives. Going into the objective part of it, let me also point out that the meaning of secularism is explained in two manners. One is the positive and another is negative. Let me take up negative first. The negative is that the religion is separate from other things. Religion and state policy cannot be linked together. These have to be different from each other, separate from each other. So it is a negation of religion. The negative aspect of secularism is that there is no place for religion in this area. But there are positive aspects also. And if we take up India as the place to concentrate upon, then you find there are two aspects of this. One is that the state has got no religion. This is called secularism. And second is that the state will treat every religion equally. I mean, there cannot be any favoritism or unnecessary inclination towards any one religion or ideology. So that way, the state has to be looked into in a very, very critical sense. And this critical sense has to be provided through two methods. One is the formal method, and this formal method is to be conducted through various institutions and organizations which are provided in the basic structure. And the basic structure is defined in the Constitution. For instance, in case of India, you have got lot many channels provided in the Constitution through which this aspect is really looked into. For instance, judiciary is one of them, election commission is another of them, comptroller and auditor general is another of them. So these are formal institutions which are provided to look into the aspect that the religion is not taken up that way that any community or any section of people suffers on the basis of favoritism, on the basis uh, of inclination towards any particular religion. And they must treat all religions equally. First is the formal institutions working for it, and the second is the creation of a conducive environment in which the whole lot of state functioning takes place. This environment comes out of many, many factors. For instance, role of media. The role of media is highly important. And in this situation, when a state is a dominant institution, and dominant in the sense that it does not simply muster authority to regulate political affairs alone, the state is also empowered to look into the social welfare part of it. The welfare activities are also taken up by it. The management of market is also, to some extent, is in the hands of the state. So that way, it is becoming more and more powerful day by day. And the slogan of the welfare of people and the slogan of welfare state and the activities of welfare state are being really pushed into. So you see that the state, when it becomes very prominent, then the whole lot of question of its behavior comes in. So this is the formal structure provided. The second part is the environment in which the whole process of secularism and secularization takes place. The environment is very important. The politics, the political institutions, they all work in a particular environment, and that environment has to be conducive to the spirit which is enshrined in the constitution of a country. For instance, if we are a liberal democracy, if we are a secular state, if we have got basic rights, if we have got the commitment to safeguard minorities, all these things, when these are provided in the constitution, then the state will have to ensure not only the formal institutions that these are working in a proper fashion, the state has to ensure that a proper environment is also there for functioning of these institutions. If environment is not conducive, then certainly the whole spirit of the constitutional rights and the safeguard of minorities, the safeguard of linguistic groups, etc., this is at jeopardy. So this this thing has to go into simultaneously. I mean, the formal institutions have to work, and these have to work in terms of keeping up the spirit of the Constitution in a proper fashion. And second is that a conducive environment is also to be created in which the political system is functioning. So this political system, when it functions, then it ensures the rights which are guaranteed to various groups by the Constitution, and the constitutional validity is ensured. Secularism is to look into both these aspects. The formal institutions are working, number one, and number two, that the proper environment, political environment is also created so that the spirit of the Constitution is really taken up. There is another word that comes to my mind, that is not only Constitution, but the constitutionalism. Constitutionalism is more important than the Constitution. The constitutionalism means that you have to take up and you have to practice the spirit sponsored by the Constitution as such. If you come to Islam and secularism kind of thing, how far Islam is there to have got, I will go to the objectives which are assigned to secularism. Secularism is propagated, is advanced, is put forward to achieve certain objectives. The objective is not one, there are many objectives like equality, liberty, fraternity, justice, social welfare, impartiality. All these aspects, if you look at, you will find that the Constitution is pushing forward. Secularism is also pushing forward these ideals. And you'll be surprised to know that Islam is also pleading, practicing, advancing forward these objectives vehemently. For instance, all these aspects, equality, if you look at the Islamic worldview, you will find that the Tawhidi paradigm, which has been talked about many times, even in these lectures that we are having, Tawhidi paradigm puts forward certain things which are very, very important. And one of the aspects which are important are the concept of unity of God, not only unity of God, unity of universe, unity of knowledge, unity of truth, and all this. So these concepts of unity, if you push forward, you will find that a new kind of relationship emerges. And Tawhidi paradigm comes forward with a definite pattern of relationship. And these can be categorized into three broad categories of relationship. One is man's relation with Almighty, man's relation with other human beings, and man's relation with other creation. The first criteria of relationship demands that man should submit before the will of Almighty in totality. This is the relationship of submission. Second is the relationship of man with other fellow human beings, and this relationship is relationship of equality. You are equal to the other human beings. And if you will look at, you will find that this aspect, all through the history of mankind, if you will see, you will find that this aspect has been the most difficult dictum for humanity to establish. Right to equality is enshrined, is given in so many philosophies, but when it comes to practice, you will find it is very, very difficult.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम। अरे जड साहब को जरा फ़ोन कीजिए, देखिए वो अरे अचानक डिस्कनेक्ट हो गए, स्पीच हो रही थी उनकी, लेक्चर हो रहा था, डिस्कनेक्ट हो गए। हाँ अचानक, ऐसा तो नहीं होता था उनकी तरफ। और ज़ड खान साहब किसी वजह से टेक्निकल दुश्वारी की वजह से डिस्कनेक्ट हो गए हैं। हम लोग उनसे बात करके रिकवर कर रहे हैं, तो आप लोग थोड़ा इंतज़ार करें, हम इसके लिए ज़रा माज़रत ख़्वाह हैं। अच्छा, तो नहीं, उनसे कहिए कि आपके मेरे मोबाइल में फ़ोन करें, ऑडियो करा देते हैं। अच्छा। उनसे कहिए कि या इधर से मिला दीजिए आप, यहीं से कॉल पे बात कराते हैं, इसी पे देते हैं मोबाइल पे लेक्चर। हाँ, मोबाइल पे करा लिए, मैं मोबाइल पे कराता हूँ। हाँ, मोबाइल पे बात कराइए, बस बात करें, वो जैसे बात करते हैं उस पर तक अपना लेक्चर दें। लाइए, मिलाइए। स्पीकर ऑन कर दीजिए। स्पीकर अच्छा है आपका? हाँ, बस एवरेज हो, काफ़ी एवरेज हो।
जी जी, तो आ जाइए, फिर ज्वाइन कर लीजिए।
और वॉल्यूम बढ़ाइए, वॉल्यूम बढ़ाइए।
आ गई, बिजली आ गई।
अच्छा, बिजली आ गई।
हाँ,
अच्छा
ठीक है, जरा लाइट डिस्कनेक्ट हो गया।
हाँ,
प्रोफेसर ज़ेडम खान साहब अपने घर से कनेक्टेड थे और लाइट चली गई थी, अब लाइट आ गई है, बस 2 मिनट में दोबारा उनका लेक्चर शुरू होगा। सॉरी फॉर इनकन्वीनियंस।
Hello.
आ रही है आपकी?
आपकी आवाज आ रही है?
आ रही है?
जी जी, प्लीज स्टार्ट।
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I think I was talking about the meaning of secularism in two terms, that is negative and positive. Negative meaning is more relevant to European situations and calls for its relevance in its historical perspective. Positive has got two aspects, positive meaning. That is, secularism means that a state has got no religion, number one. And second aspect is that a state will treat all religions equally. It will not incline towards any particular religion. This is what the second meaning of it is. So far as Indian model of secularism is concerned, we go for the second category, that is the positive aspect of secularism, where the state has got no religion, number one, and number two, the state will treat all religions equally. And for that, I was telling you that there are lots of institutions which have been provided by the Constitution to ensure that this kind of secularism is practiced unhindered. But this has to be looked into by democratic forces. And the democratic forces and institutions are to be looked into very carefully. The institutions are provided in the Constitution itself, like that of Supreme Court, like that of Election Commission, Comptroller and Auditor General, etc., etc. These are the formal institutions which come forward and try to ascertain that the state is not treating any religion with any particular preference, and all religions are treated equally by the state. But this has to be looked into very carefully, because what happens sometimes, the environment in which the whole institution is working is vitiated. And through this thing, a lot of things start coming in and affecting the whole lot of functioning of a system, where in many ways secularism is compromised. If we look to Islam as an ideology, philosophy, and so on, you will find that all those aspects which are assigned to secularism are guaranteed by Islam as a creed, as a practical contrivance. For instance, equality is ensured, equality at all costs. Liberty is also there, but within the parameters of Islamic thought and Islamic belief and faith. Fraternity is another very important aspect, and Islam takes total Ummah as an organic unit where fraternity has to be looked into. And it is not between among Muslims alone. Fraternity has to be established among all communities with whom Muslims are also living. This aspect is very important because, you know, Muslims in most of the countries, Muslim countries, are in majority. So there is a dynamics when Muslims are in majority and they are living in a particular system. But nearly 30% of Muslim population of the world is living as a minority in non-Islamic states. So this aspect has to be looked into and is to be worked out by the experts. And Institute of Objective Studies is also trying in its limited within its limited resources as to how the Muslims should evolve a a code of conduct for acting as a minority in a non-Islamic state. So fraternity part is highly important and it is to be looked into. Another very important area that Islam attaches is social justice. Social justice, because equality is the dictum, equality, universal brotherhood. It's not simply you are tolerating any other community, but you are respecting them, you are respecting their faith and belief also, and you are not instructed to interfere in their sophisticated and very intimate areas. So these areas have to be respected very carefully and have to be behaved very carefully. Another point is that justice is a very big criteria for Islam, including social justice. And social justice, when it comes to the practical plane, it becomes very, very difficult to practice. Only one situation will make you understand this thing, that if you are accountable to the core, to your Almighty, to your Lord, then only to your Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, then only you are in a position to ascertain that justice is being done. So justice is another criteria which has to be looked into very carefully, and Islam guarantees justice. Another aspect that is very important for Islam is the social welfare part of it. The welfare of society is very important. And if you look at the history, the development, the canons of Islam, you will find that these canons have not come to you only as a theory. They have come to you as a theory in the first instance, and then these are made practicable by Rasulullah in his own lifetime, and then after the whole history is there where these things are practiced with full sincerity. Social welfare is a commitment for Islam. Impartiality is a commitment for Islam. Islam does not include, Islam does not confess, Islam cannot permit you to take sides with those who do not deserve to be favored upon. So that way, a whole lot of value system is attached with Islamic thought and action. And you will find that this thought and action is actually grounded within the Quranic parameters and the Sunnah of Rasulullah and the whole lot of it. One thing is to be understood, where Gibbon has given this hint that Islam has got 4 circles. Faith is one circle, rituals is another circle, Islamic history is a third circle, and Islamic culture is 4th circle. And all these circles are mingled together and supposed to be the essential part of Islam. This is not true. Islamic history should not be taken in the fashion the Islamic faith is taken up. Islamic history is full of all defects that is prevalent in other histories also. So, because it is human history, and human history cannot be taken as Islamic history. Islamic history, to the best of my knowledge, is very, very short, which is quoted as an example. That is Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's times and Khilafat Rashida times. And then the state comes in and the state behaves the way the states behave. So this thing has to be taken with a lot of care. And Islam is to be worked upon. Islam is to be looked into from the point of view of modernity, as Professor Arshi was putting forward, that Islam has to be made relevant to the modern times and look to see as to how the whole thing is gone. One should also be, I would like to point out that there are 4 aspects of human personality where man has to look into 2 sources, that is the revelation and reason. These are the 2 sources of training, 2 sources of drawing your lessons from. As you know, the basic nature of man is that man is a spiritual moral being. He's not a material being that way. So if you are a spiritual moral being, then you have got 4 aspects of your personality. The most manifest personality of man is his physical personality. The second one is his sentimental self. He is guided by his sentiments. And the third aspect is his rational personality. And the fourth one is his spiritual personality. To my mind, what appears that the spiritual personality is one, and that is to guide all other aspects of human personality, that is his rational personality, sentimental personality, and physical personality. And this spiritual personality has to draw its lessons and its strength by 2 sources, that is revelation and reason. Revelation and reason are not contradictory to each other. These are complementary to each other. And Islam is very fortunate in terms of having the latest message through Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and through revolution, we have got the whole lot of lessons available to us. And we have got the whole lot of practical manifestation of these principles. So we have got the theory and the practice both, which are relevant and which are prevalent today. We should not be simply guided by propaganda material of modern times, where Islam is converted into a situation of Islamophobia. Everybody is hitting, and at that point of time, I think we should be highly careful. When I say careful, I mean we should have to work very hard on those aspects which are relevant and which are really important for us. We have left everything to others and they should take care of us. It is not possible. They will not take care for us. They will be hitting us left and right and center. And that is why the most important aspect of today's situation is that the Muslims, Muslim intelligentsia in particular, Muslim professionals in particular, should come forward and they should try to make their progress, in their own areas, but within the parameters told by Quran and Sunnah. And we should also be very, very particular in terms of evolving, innovating methods which suit us in terms of taking up lessons from our own creed, our own canons, and then try to make them relevant to the present situation. Unless we make them relevant to the present situation, we will not be able to really bring about any improvement in the situation. Because this is the age of technology, this is the age of globalization, this is the age of communication, this is the age of innovation. So in all these areas, Muslims as a community have to come forward and to have to work very hard in their respective fields. If somebody is teacher, he should be a very honest, good Muslim teacher, so that he should be able to command respect in his own area, and people should respect him in a particular fashion. So Islam is not contradictory to secularism, but I can say that all those aspects which are covered by secularism are very dear to Islamic philosophy and Islamic practice. But the invitation is, as I have already mentioned, that all the professionals have to work very hard in terms of looking into the modern paradigm and to see as to what are really the areas which call for the involvement, which call for the homogeneity of Ummah. Because there are two kinds of homogeneities. One is that I am talking about the homogeneity coming out of Islamic philosophy and action, and another is material homogeneity which is being created by the modern world. The modern world wants to make you homogeneous so that element of hegemony is established. Hegemony is not possible without homogenization. So homogenization should really be looked into from the point of view of your own traditions, of your own culture, of your own philosophy that emanate from Islamic doctrines and Islamic faith. And I'm again emphasizing that Muslim history should be looked into afresh, and Muslims should accept those defects which have crept into the Muslim history at different points of time. And this should be accepted as misnomers, and they should be accepted as shortcomings, so that we should be able to put the whole thing into proper perspective. So I think I have spoken and my time is over. So this is what I wanted to say. There are many things which should really be emphasized, but my time and my topic and my theme is like this, that I would prefer to stop at this moment. Thank you very much.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया प्रोफेसर ज़ैद खान साहब। दो सवालात हैं
जी
अता साहब आ गए हैं, वो पढ़कर आपको सुनाएंगे। तीन, बल्कि एक और तीन हो गया है।
थैंक यू वेरी मच। एक दो सवालात हैं डॉक्टर साहब। एक तो व्हेन वी से that state has no official religion and it is secular, do we also mean that religious leaders cannot be politicians? Because state is what the government leaders make of it. Also, do the commoners out to be secular as well, as in keep religion away from public life?
I'm not seeing my questions. There is one question by Mir Imtiaz Afreen. Are you reading the same?
No, this question has been raised by Muhammad Umair Yunus in question and answer section. If you can see it.
No, I'm seeing only Mr. Mir Imtiaz Afreen question.
Okay.
Before Afreen, there are two questions. One is from Hamidullah Marazi, and another one is from Muhammad Yunus, as I was asking.
Now you are.
I get Marazi's question.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Your lecture was, I have a question, is there any difference between notion of secularism and its Western and Indian orientation connotation? I've already explained that, Western connotation of secularism is supposed to be negative, that is anti-religion. If you say secular in Western world, it is anti-religion. But if you say secular in India, that is not anti-religion. We have taken the positive side of it. And the positive side of it, I've explained already, there are two meanings. One is that the state has got no religion, number one, and state will treat all religions equally. We have taken these, and these are actually the ideas which have been taken into consideration are of Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Rabindranath Tagore. These are the three who have pushed forward this the positive meaning of secularism, and with there we have incorporated that part even in our constitution. So. The faith, how can you comparing secularism with Islam cannot be justified? No, I'm not comparing secularism with Islam. I am trying to say that whatever elements of secularism has got as an objective, these objectives have already been taken care of by Islam, like that of equality, liberty, fraternity, justice, social welfare, impartiality, and so on. So I'm not saying that secularism is that way taken. Umair Yunus, when we say that the state has no official religion, it's secular, do we also mean that religious leaders cannot be politicians? Because state is what government leaders make it also. No, state is what the constitution is telling you. State is not what the leaders make it. If leaders make it, then you will be in trouble. You have to operate within a particular framework, and that framework is already provided by the constitution itself. Islamic Israr Ahmad terming secularism as shirk, and I don't want to go into the particular individualistic opinions about secularism, because there are lots and lots of opinions about secularism and so on and so forth, and we are very prompt in terms of giving our verdict about anything. So I have explained the parameters in which the whole thing is to be taken up, and we have taken up. Islam guarantees freedom of religion, but to what level does it permit the minorities to follow their personal laws under Islamic State? Islamic State, the first constitution, that is the Misaq-e-Medina, is quoted as the first constitution of the world, and there all rights of minorities are safeguarded, and these are agreed upon. So I need not to elaborate on this. Secularism is not contradictory to Islam, but as we know that they want to subordinate the religion to a state and compel us to accept. Let me tell you, who wants you to make subordinate, etc., etc.? I'm not going into that part of it. Nobody is making you to believe that way. You believe only what the constitution is giving you, and if constitution is safeguarded, then you are in a position to enjoy your rights, because your constitution guarantees you all kinds. My question was not answered. Please wish Sarzadam Khan Sahab answer. Which one? Ghazanfar Ali. I have not seen your question, Ghazanfar. What is your question? It is not figuring in my this thing. I don't get your question, Ghazanfar. Okay, I think I close here. And thank you very much, Institute of Objective Studies, for giving me this opportunity to explain myself and to express myself on this. And I don't want to delay the whole proceeding because my time seems to be over. Thank you very much. Hello, am I audible? Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for such a thought-provoking lecture. We now move forward to another lecture of the series. And the theme of the lecture is non-Muslims during the time of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and Rashidun Khalifate. The speaker is Professor Abdul Rashid Bhatt. We request him to please start his lecture.
Okay, thank you very much.
Professor Abdul Rashid Bhatt, sir.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are. Please proceed.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulil Kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Respected organizers of Winter School Program in Islamic Studies, learned participants, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to have my presentation on an important topic in this workshop. Though I am not expert in this field, yet I tried my best during these days to have some important pointers and prepare my presentation on the theme. However, I slightly modified the theme as non-Muslims under Prophet Muhammad and Rashidun Caliphate, an approach to the position of human rights. The presentation is divided in 4 sections. The first section is introduction, and second section is Prophet as a man, and Muhammad as a man and the Prophet, and then Hijrah to Medina, and then the formation of Misaki Medina, and then the important basic rights of man, and lastly the conclusion. Let me start my presentation. Yes, please. Yes, please, slide first. Man is the supreme creation of God on earth, who has distinctive faculties and potential. He has his dignity and individuality, needs its expression that is natural and social. Islam recognizes as well as promotes well this nature of man. The Prophet Muhammad is a living example of extending man the basic freedoms and rights as a human being and a dignified member of a society. He promoted and exemplified it on the basis of divine guidance given in the Holy Quran as the last prophet of Allah towards mankind. In it the situation excuse me ये कुछ यहाँ पर बंद ही करे बंद Excuse me, one minute.
Next slide.
Yes, sorry for this delay. Yes, and exemplified it on the basis of the divine guidance given in the Quran and as the last prophet of Allah towards in it, the status and rights of non-Muslims became a good concern and they were granted to them justly in the Islamic State. Since the Prophet was born in Arabia and the center of his Islamic call and social realization took place in this region. Later on, his political successors and followers called Khulafai Rashidun continued and extended this cause of Islam. Here, our focus will be on the basic freedoms, which are also called human rights in today's parlance, granted to non-Muslims under the Prophet ﷺ and Rashidun Caliphate. Muhammad ﷺ, the man and the prophet. Muhammad was born in Arabia in 570 AD and lived the age of about 62 years. His life can be divided in two parts, pre-prophetic and prophetic period. He was endowed with prophethood in 1610 AD at the age of 40, and the rest years up to 30 AD of his life was a struggle and role as a prophet of Allah. Even in his pre-prophetic period, he is reported in annals of history as most honest, generous, and wise person in Makkah. Yet it is his prophethood that elevates him as the chosen one by Allah for the mission of apostleship. The Prophet has two phases of his career. One is Meccan phase and the other is the Medinan phase. It is distinguished by the Hijrah, the Prophet's immigration along with his followers from Mecca to Medina in 1622 AD. It is also a landmark in Islamic history in several ways. Hijrah to Medina. In Mecca, the Prophet's call to Islam attracted only to a small number of people. Most of the people who were pagans or polytheists, mushrikun, rejected and opposed it strongly. They abused and tortured Muslims to the worst extent in Mecca, and the later only showed preservation, sabr, on it and ultimately had to migrate to Medina. In Medina, the Prophet ﷺ was welcomed by its people, particularly who newly embraced Islam and had pledged the Prophet to be loyal to faith and support at every order. It is in Medina that Islam gained a good footing by its people who embraced its faith. It is also of great historical significance that the two groups, Muhajirin and Ansar, were bounded by the bond of Muwaiqat, brotherhood, that formed a strong solidarity in Medina. Soon it was joined by the other non-Muslims, mainly Jews of Medina, and big community Ummah was formed under the leadership of the Prophet in the first year of Hijrah. Formation of Misak Medina and the proclamation of basic rights. Both the Muslims and the Jews agreed upon some principles of mutual cooperation and rights for peaceful living and is called Misak Medina, Covenant of Medina. It is also termed as the Constitution of Medina state, founded under the leadership of the Prophet. It has 48 provisions and is documented in many of the history works authentically. Most of the basic rights granted to non-Muslims under the Prophet are found in it. They are further traced from the Hadith and in the instructions which the Prophet gave to Muslims on the emergence of new situations of the state, particularly after the conquest of Makkah in 1630 AD. After the Prophet, these basic rights of non-Muslims continued to be in force under the Rashidun Caliphs and even extended with the expansion of Islamic State, particularly under the third Khalifa Umar Farooq Raziyallahu anhu. Both the Muslims under the Both the Muslims and the Jews agreed upon some principles. Under the Prophet and the Khulafai Rashidin, a good number of human or basic rights were granted to non-Muslims, also called zimmis, pledged to live peacefully, which determine their status in the society and its democratic, multicultural, and multi-religious nature. Here we shall discuss some of them briefly. Number one, protection of life. In Islam, life is sacred. It is one's unique asset. Its preservation and security is guaranteed both in the Quran and in the Prophet's Sunnah. Life of both the Muslim and the non-Muslim is equally sacred and protected in an Islamic state. Quran says, do not kill any person whom Allah has forbidden to kill except with right. 17 Surah 33 verse. Therefore, we have ordered for the children of Israel that he who slays a soul, unless it be in punishment for murder or for spreading mischief on earth, shall be as if he had slain all mankind, and who saves a life be as if he had given life to all mankind. 5 Surah 32 verse. In Medinan covenant, it is mentioned as whosoever murders, anyone will have murdered himself and the members of his family, unless it be the case of a man suffering from wrong, for God will accept his action. Second, in a hadith reported by Abdullah ibn Umru, the Prophet says, the person who murdered a person with whom there was pledge of peace, he will be deprived of the smell of paradise. There is a retaliation, qisas, in murdering a person even in case of non-Muslims. The Prophet has done it practically when he ordered the murder of a Muslim who had killed a non-Muslim citizen, zimmi. The Prophet said that he stands firmly for his promise. Umar Farooq radiallahu anhu is said to have executed retaliation of a Jew or a Christian who was killed by a Muslim of Hira, Sunan Bahiki. Blood money death is also granted to the relatives of non-Muslim murder, as is allowed in case of a Muslim. As reported by Asma bin Zaid, the Prophet declared the blood money of a non-Muslim murder equal to that of a Muslim. Under the all-pious Khulafa, Abu Bakr, Umar, Ali, and Usman, the law of blood money continued to remain in force accordingly. Second, protection of wealth. The wealth of a non-Muslim is secure, as is that of a Muslim. The Quran enjoins, do not usurp one another's possessions by false means. Second Surah 188 verse. It is allowed when there is mutual consent of the two. On asking about the permissibility of the properties of a Jew of Khaybar for the Muslims on the eve of having a treaty with them, the Prophet summoned the Muslims and declared that God has not allowed you to enter into the houses of Ahlul Kitab without permission, nor beat their wives, nor eat their fruits till they fulfill their responsibilities. This is also carried out by Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, as reported by Yahya bin Sa'id, that while deputing Yazid bin Abu Sufyan as commander of the army to Syria, he instructed them 10 pointers. Do not kill women, children, weak, old men. Do not cut trees or destroy agricultural land. Do not cut legs of a goat except for food. Do not burn or cut trees. Do not be dishonest or coward. In the application of punishment of theft, both Muslim and non-Muslims are equal. The Prophet was very keen about the protection of wealth of non-Muslims, that he, in spite of repeated betrayals and conspiracies of the Jews against the Muslims, he asked them to sell their land to anyone when they were asked to leave Medina. Protection of honor and dignity. In Islam, each individual has his honor and dignity. Here is no racial, linguistic, regional, or color discrimination. Non-Muslims enjoy respect and honor in a just way. The Quran clearly mentions about this dignity of an individual. We have honored the sons of Adam, provided them with transport on land and sea, given them for sustenance things good and pure, and conferred on them special favors above a great part of our creation. Another verse, O ye who believe, let not some men among you laugh at others, nor defame, nor be sarcastic to each other by offensive nicknames, nor speak ill of each other behind their backs. Words of abuse, laughing at any person, and backbiting are prohibited. Those who become subject of disrespect and dishonor can make complaint against the wrongdoer, and due action is taken by the state. Umar Farooq, during his caliphate, was much sensitive about this and asked his officers to to maintain the respect of their people. In a hadith, Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said that if anybody has disrespected any person, he should seek forgiveness from the victim before it is too late, that the day will come when no wealth and money will be of his use, and only his good deeds will be taken from him in proportion to his commission of the injustice. The Prophet calls this respect as a grave injustice with anybody. Fourth, education interactions. Non-Muslims were granted a right to education under the Prophet. He instructed the Muslims to educate their maids as they were mainly non-Muslims. Education was open to all sections of society. No discrimination was made in it. The Prophet visited the Madrasa Baitul Madaris of Jews in Medina. He asked the Muslims to learn the language of the Jews. The non-Muslim prisoners of war were asked to teach learning to the Muslim children. Interactions with non-Muslims were encouraged to learn the wisdom. Next, political rights. In the political field during the Prophet, non-Muslims have a limited role. Laws of the state come from Allah and the Prophet. In its application and administrative fields, the mutual consultation of Muslims was also made occasionally. Since there is little scope in legislation in Islam, and laws come from Allah, and in the lawmaking, Muslims have very little rule, and not to talk of the non-Muslims. And the scope is only for the consultation to frame laws in the new situation where nusus are not given concretely. However, the Prophet appointed one non-Muslim to guide him secretly, and his close fellow Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, on their way to Medina at the time of Hijrah. It was on the basis of his trust in the person. As per the report of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, the Prophet sought help from Banu Kainenka Jews. In one more report, it is said that in his expedition to Khaybar, the Prophet took 10 Jews with him. In the Battle of Hunain, the help of Sufyan bin Umayyah was used, who was a non-Muslim polytheist. Shibli Nomani, renowned modern scholar, makes mention of the engagement of non-Muslim in administrative affairs during the early period of Islam in one of his articles. In it, he says that in the organization of kharaj, taxation, and other financial departments, the services of Christians and Zoroastrians were used. In the military affairs, there was little use of the services of non-Muslims, and that is Zimmis. Later on, it was during the time of Emir Muawiyah that one Christian was appointed as financial commissioner of Hamas. Next, Sikh's religious freedom. Islam proclaims freedom of religion and conscience. There is no compulsion in religion of Islam. The Quran categorically mentions it in Surah Baqarah 26, 5 verse, La ikraha fi deen. In An-Nahl verse 33, it is mentioned to the Prophet, but if they turn away, your only duty is to clearly deliver the message of truth. The Prophet extended this choice of faith at the early stage of Makkah when the mushrikeen were persuading him to their faith, and the Prophet's stand was that each side will bear the fruits of their respective faith. The verse of Surah Al-Kafirun is a clear illustration. Lakum dinakum waliyad-din. To you is your religion, and to me my religion. The verse 108 of Surah Anam is a good plea for religious freedom. Do not revile those other than Allah whom they invoke, because they will revile Allah in ignorance out of spite. On a conflict between a Muslim and a Jew in Medina, who was slapped by the former on saying that the Prophet Moses Islam is superior to all in knowledge, including Muhammad, and the Prophet disliked this behavior and highlighted the greatness of Moses Islam. Next. Umar Farooq is said to have asked his non-Muslim slave named Wasak to embrace Islam so that some responsibility of the Khilafah will be assigned to him. The slave rejected his repeated invitations, and the Khalifa Umar did not, however, force him in it, as Islam allows religious freedom to its non-Muslim citizens. The Prophet ﷺ allowed the non-Muslims to have their own personal law and their cases according to their religion. In one of the criminal cases, he asked the Jews to get their religious book and the punishment will be given as per its guidance. The religious places of non-Muslims like churches, synagogues, etc., are protected for the worship of the respective devotees. The Quran mentions the rationale of this protection in Surah Al-Hajj, verse 40. The Prophet guaranteed protection of religious places and their land and priests to Najran people in his agreement declaration. It reads that there is no protection of Allah and his Prophet to the life. There is protection of Allah and his Prophet to the life, property, land, community, and existing existing buildings, religious places. No religious officer will be deprived of his position, nor any priest of his priesthood. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, during his time of Khilafah, renewed this agreement of the Prophet and ensured the security of religious places of Ahlul Najran. In the reign of Abu Bakr, Khalid bin Walid, military commander, agreed upon a peace agreement with people of Hira, and in the treaty document it is mentioned that no synagogue and church will be destroyed. They will not be stopped from blowing their conches nor from taking cross during their religious festivals. Next, freedom of expression. In Islam, non-Muslims have their freedom of expression. In their own circles, they are free to express their religious and ideological views and propagate them. In the general way, they are allowed to express their views when some injustice or wrong is inflicted upon them as per the constitution of the state. This right is inferred from An-Nisa verse 148. Allah does not like speaking evil publicly unless one has been wronged. The Prophet had to call his men on the Khaybar expedition when a Jew of Medina made a complaint against the wrong behavior of the Muslims. Umar Farooq anhu allowed to hear the arguments of conversion to Islam by coercion made by his slave that such conversion is not approved in Islam. Next, treatment of generosity. In addition to the basic freedoms of human rights, the non-Muslims enjoyed generous and good treatment under the Prophet ﷺ and the Rashidun Caliphs. On the calamity of severe drought in Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ sent 500 dinars to Meccan leader Abu Sufyan for the help of needy in Mecca. After the conquest of Mecca, the Prophet gave a general amnesty to all his enemies, and only 4 were executed for their crimes. His enemies hardly expected the forgiveness for their grave hostility against the Prophet. This is high generosity and kindness on the part of the Prophet ﷺ, and it paved the way for the Islam's wide popularity as the religion of peace and welfare. The economic help to non-Muslims who were weak and destitute was a good concern of the caliphs. It is said in Kitab al-Amwal by Abu Ubaid. Next slide. Next slide, please. That Umar Farooq once came across an old Zimmi who begged money for the people. When asked about the cause of it, that he could not pay jizya. On this, Umar retrospected that they were not just enough with the man whose earning they ate, yet collect jizya from him in his old age. Umar wrote to his governors that the old be exempted from the jizya. Later on, it became a rule of exemption for those who are old non-Muslims. Abu Yusuf adds to it to this incident of Umar Raziallahu anhu as the Khalifa of Islam, that Umar took even the old Zimmi to his home and helped him with something. He also asked the officer of the Baitul Mal to treat the category of Masakin in Zakah verse as Ahlul Kitab. Umar Raziallahu anhu at last made a suggestion to his successor about the securities of the Zimmis by saying, I am advising you about the Zimmis. Allah and His Prophet has taken their responsibility. Their pledge be fulfilled, and they are to be protected and not to be burdened beyond the capacity. Next, conclusion. To conclude, it can be said that Islam is basically a religion of rights and duties of an individual being who is supreme creation of God on earth. Basic rights or human rights are granted to individuals or citizens in case some more rights, when some more rights are granted, while more rights are granted to Muslims for their specific responsibility in an Islamic state. If there are some more rights granted to the Muslims and they are in view of their having the responsibilities in an Islamic state as they are at the hand of the affairs in terms of following the law of Allah. Non-Muslims are also called Zimmis, who become citizens of an Islamic state either through any agreement or conquest or birth. Either they make a agreement fact with the Muslims to be peace in their state, or they come into the fold of Islamic State by the conquest, or they get the birth there uh, in the uh, in the state of Muslims. Under the Prophet and Rashidun Khulafa, non-Muslims were granted almost all basic freedoms or human rights. What are the basic freedoms of a man as a human being, or what human rights are there? They are granted to the non-Muslims, uh, like protection of life, property, honor and dignity, education and religion. The rights are initially enunciated in the Covenant of Medina, called Misaki Medina, by the mutual agreement between the Muslims, Muhajirin and Ansar, and the non-Muslims, chiefly the Jews of Medina. It served as the constitution of Medinan state, formed under the leadership of the Prophet. Next. Next slide. Let's later on in the coming years of the development of the state, uh, depicted the application of these rights and its more growth in Arabia. Although the Medinan Covenant Charter has been studied amply, yet its deep analysis in the new context will be of great scope in knowing its wider socio-political implications. In a detailed analytic manner, we have not enough literature on this Medinan Covenant, Medinan Charter, which is a historical development in Islamic political history. And I feel the need of having a deep analysis of it in the new context, so that its wider political implications can be explored in the present age. Granting the basic rights and freedoms to its all citizens justly provided a good, peaceful living to its enemies, non-Muslims, along with the Muslim brethren on the one hand, and on the other hand, it gradually popularized the Islamic message of peace and welfare that made the neighboring nations to join Muslim state and retaining their basic freedoms. Basic rights granted to non-Muslims was not a majority and minority issue as found in modern polity, but fundamental responsibility of the Muslim society to protect social and cultural freedoms and welfare of its non-Muslim citizens, justly as it was made clear, or as it is clear by Umar Farooq Raziyallahu anhu's last advice to Muslims who followed him, who succeeded him, and it was his wasiyah. Thank you for the presentation, hearing the presentation patiently.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdul Rashid Bhatt Sahab. We have few questions. If you can see the questions in question answer segment and reply, or should I read it?
Yes, yes, sir. Let me see first.
The first question is, did the expansion campaigns of any of the caliphs ever draft a rule that no new holy monuments of any non-Muslim religion will be constructed, nor the existing ones will be repaired on their conquered lands?
Did the expansion campaigns of any of the caliphs ever draft a rule that on new holy monuments of any non-Muslim religion will be constructed, nor the existing ones will be repaired on their conquered land? As I have gone through the political history of the Khulafa, there is no such evidence that they have destroyed any non-Muslim monument and then constructed this Muslim monument there, and there is these religious places have been protected fully by the Khulafa Rashidin during their period, and it was basic freedom for them, religious freedom, and even when during the time of Umar, Khalifa Umar bin Abdul Aziz, some complaint was made about the annexation of church, and he made it back. He let it back, made it go back to the non-Muslims. Although this error has been made during the later period of the Muslim rule by some ruler in a hasty manner. And this is my response to this question. Second is Ghaznafar Ali. Regretfully, the paper lecture developed question vis-a-vis sectors within Muslims, and subsequent developed the big question that the Muslims and Islamic teachings of majority post to caliphate can not manage tolerance within them, how Islam can be considered doctrine for entire humanity. Yes, that the rise of the crisis during the last two caliphs could not make it so stable as it was in the earlier period of Islam. And this depends, this has its own factors, and because of the Muslim character having some lacuna in the Muslim character itself, and which create many misunderstandings and rivalries in among them, and that led to the instability of the Khilafah in its last phase. Yet all that Islam has two these facets. One is its doctrinal facet, and other is its practical facet. And practical facet depends upon the following of the Muslims, that how sincere, loyal they are to Islam, how devoted they are to Islam, and how they can frame a social stability and political stability. And in its doctrinal way, it is perfect, and because it's a real religion, and Prophet ﷺ is a perfect model of it. However, the subsequent generation of Muslims can have the good character, they can have not the character to the mark, and that can lead to the disstability and the misunderstanding about the doctrinal aspect of Islam itself. Yet it's not true that doctrinally it is perfect, and it while being intellectually and morally loyal to it, it can make a practical manifestation on the sound lines. That was not that got affected during the last phase of the caliphate, and so it could not had its stability as it had in the early phase. Yes, any more question?
Yes, there is one last question. Then, do you think that making Hagia Sophia a mosque while it was a church originally is justified in terms of Islam?
I cannot know much about it. I cannot respond to this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. With this lecture, this session comes to an end. There is a break from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. After the break, there is one session in which we will have 3 lectures: Islam and Liberation Movement by Professor Aftab Alam, Islamic State in the Modern World by Professor Ubaidullah Fahad Flahi, and Non-Muslims in Modern Islamic States, Citizens or Ahle Kitab by Professor Hamid Naseem Rafiabadi. The valedictory session will start at 4 p.m., in which we will have the keynote address on the theme, The Way Ahead, Regenerating Knowledge in Islamic Perspective by Professor Omar Hassan Kasule, Secretary General, International Institute of Islamic Thought, United States of America. We will have presidential address by Dr. Muhammad Manzoor Alam, Chairman, Institute of Objective Studies. A few words from Professor Zadem Khan, Secretary General, Institute of Objective Studies, and a vote of thanks will be proposed by Professor Ishtiyaq Danis, convener of the program. So after the break, we will meet inshallah again. Thank you very much.